Hello, 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 coaches and leaders. I am so excited to have like a colleague here with me. She's super knowledgeable about a lot of things, and we're going to be talking about her book called Still Learning and the elements in it, which I am super geeky about. So we're probably going to take some side roads and some long ways to get some places because I love talking about this stuff. So before we dive into the content, I first wanted to welcome you to the show, Allie.
Thank you so much, Becca. I'm super excited to be here and have an opportunity to dialogue even more together.
Yeah. So before we jump in, I'd love you to share with everyone what's been your journey in education, what's your experience, and what has landed you to doing what you do right now.
So, I have been in a number of different roles in education from middle and high school social studies teacher to instructional coach. I've worked as an assistant principal and a director of professional learning. I've also been a board member for a number of years. And through each of those roles, the role of professional learning and how we help adults learn has always been really important to me. We spend so much time thinking about curriculum design and facilitation of learning for our students. And sometimes we miss those other learners in our buildings that are modeling that for those kids. So throughout those different positions to where I am now as a full-time professional learning provider, and facilitator, it really has been about that learning design and facilitation to make sure it's as meaningful and personal for educators as possible.
I love it. And I know one thing that you talk a lot in your book is adult learning theory. And I actually love you this whole matrix, like connecting all these different things. And it's like, hey, like in these different parts and processes, and I think you match up SEL, the SEL, like five components of SEL with adult learning. And I was like, this is fantastic. You can already hear me geeking out. But I don't think we talk about adult learning theory enough. Like this is research based, and adults come to learning experiences in some ways different than children, right?
And I think we forget that our identities as learners and as humans, I know you talk a lot about the human-centered approach to coaching. Those aren't fully formed until
Mhm.
way past our traditional schooling experience. But we try and apply some of those same learning principles to the adult experience that we know work in the classroom. And while some of that certainly is applicable, things like authentic and meaningful learning experiences, there are other components related to being job embedded or being goal driven that just don't surface as much in the student space, but are absolutely necessary in the adult space.
Yeah, right. Like we all have goals, whether or not we know. Right? Sometimes we have those like default goals, like it's just there and it's kind of unconsciously there, and I'm just doing the things that I do. And sometimes we have goals that we say that we have. Sometimes we say we
Mhm.
have goals that we actually don't have, we don't want, right? Like I say I
Yeah.
want to lose weight, but I'm not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just love that. And I love that you talk about that in your book as well. So before we kind of circle around it, I want to
Yeah.
dive right in. You really launched your book with talking about SEL
Mhm.
for adults, which is such an important conversation to have. I mean, this is partially why I called my company the Whole Educator, right? I believe in understanding social emotional learning needs for adults, and this is very distinct from therapy. And I want to say that because I think sometimes they get collapsed. Like if we're talking about SEL, does that mean we're doing therapy? No, 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 no. We're not doing therapy. We're understanding out how our human adult brains work, how mine, right? We want to be self-aware, and then how their adult brains work. So I want to just ask you why is this important that we that we do the work to understand the social emotional development of adult learners?
This particular piece, Becca, was actually sort of born out of my previous book, focused on personalized professional learning. So when that came out in 2019, there were a number of leaders that reached out and they kind of fell in three different spaces, right? Some of them were like, yep, this is exactly what I need, exactly when I needed it. Others said, oh, this is awesome. We're totally on board with this concept of system wide personalized professional learning. But can you give us more support to help our teacher leaders and our building leaders be better facilitators? Because we're used to facilitating for students. we need more support and coaching around what that looks like in the adult space. And then I had a group of leaders who came out very honestly and transparently and said, we believe in these concepts at their core, but we just don't have the learning culture to get there yet, right? Our teachers don't know themselves well enough as learners. They need more support around their own goal setting and time management processes. We need support in our teams around stronger team dynamics and communication and perspective taking. And that really sort of nudged me in a way to not just, tend on one side to helping professional learning facilitators, but then also meet the needs at the system, the team, and the individual level to begin thinking about how do we strengthen professional and organizational capacity? What does that look like not just for a single educator or leader, but a whole team or a whole system in a way that was truly meaningful and sustainable. And coming out of that, we sort of went into that period over from 2020 to who knows when, right? I don't even know what the end marker is at this point. Where that need for social emotional learning, I think, surfaced even more for both our students and our educators. And you're right, it's not therapy. It really is grounded in that idea of knowing yourself and being aware of others' perspectives and thinking about how that makes you stronger as a team from a collective sense rather than just an individual one.
Yeah. And I love that you have this, like, you have this lens and the skill of capacity building system wide all the way down to personalized learning, but just like kind of that individual level, I guess we could say, right? And I think that's great. And it's such an important skill set to have and work with people, because if we're kind of doing the individual thing, if we're like, I'm going to work with you and I'm going to work with you and I'm going to make you better, right? And we're sending them back into a culture that doesn't support that new learning, most often the change that we've worked so hard to create isn't sustained.
And I think right now in education, we've reached this place where we keep sort of preaching self-care and forgetting about the community care part of that
Mm-hmm.
it's not enough to just tell someone to go ahead and recharge, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
to take that time, but instead really supporting them with team and school-wide and district-wide systems that operate from that place of community care and recognize that we need educators who are going to be committed to us for the long game. It can't just be that short burst of energy or recharge or the dress down day or the candy in the mailbox that's going to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be some real intentional and sustainable work in this area.
I love that you said that. During the pandemic, I had all this messaging that I was doing on social media around, like, jeans days are fun, but that's not building buy-in. That's not self-care. That's not any of, they're fun. I'm not dismissing it, but when we say build relationships, we're not talking about a popcorn cart.
No.
That doesn't build relationships.
Yeah. And I think that's even hard, on the professional learning side, right?
Mhm.
So individuals like ourselves can certainly come in and facilitate a keynote on very strategic and targeted topics.
Mhm.
But if there's a district or a school reaching out to us to say, we need to really strengthen the capacity of our educators, that's
Mhm.
not a one and done 60-minute show. Like that's
Mhm.
a real conversation about how your educators know themselves, how your teams operate and communicate together. And
Mhm.
I think that's the hard part of the work is it's not just a checkbox, but instead a commitment.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's ongoing. It's not a one and done. So you have these 5 disciplines of capacity building, and I would love you to share about them kind of one by one. I know I have thoughts about some of them that are awesome, but yeah, I'd love you to share with everyone what are those 5 disciplines.
Certainly. So I'll just do kind of a quick walkthrough of the five, and then if we want to dig in on any of them more specifically, we can. So, starting at kind of the individual end of the spectrum, if you will, there's this discipline of attunement, and part of that is self-awareness, who you are in terms of your static and your dynamic identity, but it's also really about understanding your growth profile. So in this work, I found it really interesting that individuals in other fields beyond education knew a lot about themselves. And that was a part of their regular conversation with a manager in terms of what's your Clifton Strengths Finder, and what are some
Mhm,
of your values in action, and how is your Enneagram guiding your decision making or your team dynamics? And for whatever reason, we don't have a lot of those conversations as educators. So that first discipline of attunement really looks to educators to know themselves, their perceived self, and then to also create safe spaces where there's attunement or harmony between the individual that they can bring to the workplace, that presented self, so that they don't feel as though they're hiding certain parts of their identity, and are wasting energy there, but instead are able to embrace and harness kind of that collective acceptance and be able to know how they're going to learn best and also how their colleagues are going to learn best and be able to be supportive in that space. The second discipline is sort of an overlap between individual and team, and it's the discipline of alignment. So, looking at individuals and goal and teams to set both personal and professional goals, to
mhm,
recognize that yes, we have, a commitment to student growth objectives and to certain achievement targets for our school, but we don't always go about the goal setting process on the personal side with the same level of clarity and commitment. And
mhm,
because of that, that's why we often feel burnt out, because we're
mhm,
not tracking our progress in the same way that we're tracking benchmarks or engaging in data analysis.
mhm,
Um, from there, the discipline moves, pretty firmly into the team space to look at the discipline of perspective.
mhm,
So now that you sort of know yourself and you have your goals and you're starting to establish some team goals, how are you bringing those different perspectives to the table to be able to engage in sometimes challenging conversations in a respectful way that amplifies one another's work rather than stifles it?
mhm,
From there, we look at the discipline of collective efficacy. So, if
mhm,
if alignment was about setting your own personal goals and then starting to kind of dabble in the team space, collective efficacy really looks at how do we set team-wide goals and
mhm,
use them to measure our ongoing collective and group progress. And then finally, the fifth discipline looks at organizational learning and the principles there. So, thinking about how do we become a true learning ecosystem that's deliberately developmental, where we're not just growing the people within our building, both students and educators, but also sort of becoming that model learning organization for other fields where they look to us and they're like, oh, this is how we design training, and this is how we craft teams, and this is what that progress at the adult level, in addition to the student level, has the potential to look like.
mhm. I love this. These are so great. So I want to dive into some of them because
Good.
I'm like super excited about it. So I want to talk about attunement. That's what the first one's called, correct?
Yep, correct.
Attunement. Okay, good. So attunement's like very, I mean, and the SEL components, like that is aligned with self-awareness, correct? That's
Hmm.
what I make. Okay.
Yep.
And they're in that chapter, it is chalk. You just like throw all the things into that chapter. It is if you just if everyone here buys that book and just reads the first chapter, I just feel like you will get so much. And it's really kind of a sampler platter of a wide range of assessments and tools for us to understand ourselves better. And it's not like one assessment's better than the other. It's just I like to call it like an axis to understanding ourselves, an axis to understand other people. And having a wide range of them in our own tool belt can, what I love about them personally is we can name things non-judgmentally. So for example, in Myers-Briggs, I imagine a lot of people listening know Myers-Briggs. It's those four letters, right? Oh, what is yours, Allie? What's your Myers-Briggs?
So I'm actually an ENFJ,
I
but
am too.
that's
We're
hilarious. What's
the same.
super interesting is the E and the I
hmm
components are
hmm
super close for me. Like it's a
hmm
very narrow margin. And I,
hmm
I I think it's because part of my work is around facilitation, but then a
hmm
really critical part of my work is around reflection and stepping back, right? So
Yeah.
it's interesting to think about how that particular type indicator plays out on the personal side of things as well as the professional side.
Yeah, right. So the E and the I is extroverted versus introverted, which is not about being shy or outgoing. It is about how we energize. So introverts energize by themselves, extroverts energize with other people. I'm definitely not I'm like over to the east side. I'm like hanging
Harmony.
out with the other people. I'm like, who wants to, um But I actually wanted to highlight that last letter, J versus P, which is it stands for judging versus perceiving, which I don't even know why those are named. But the essentially the categories talk someone that's a J is very much a planner, a list maker, organized, right? And then there's the P's that love spontaneity. They kind of have like a method to their own madness. And I find like J's and P's, if they're kind of more extreme, they have a hard time understanding the other person. And it can, if they're extreme, it can like be a rub, like because if someone's like, I need order and I need to be making the list, someone that's a strong P could their chaos could really upset the J's, and like J's could be like, you're doing it wrong, right? You're just disorganized. And the P's thrive off spontaneity. Like winging it is their jam. And they're like, don't hold me back with your plans. I don't want to make a plan because I feel trapped. Right. So
Yeah.
I find that one, and I remember years ago when I learned about the Myers-Briggs, I was like, this is brilliant. This names a thing that people can be judgmental about other people. And I'm like, oh, this is so great. It's just a difference in preference.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, what sort of, brings you energy, right? So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
get a ton of energy from that planning side of things that helps
Hmm.
me stay much more focused, to be able to kind of put things in neat boxes and color codes. And then when chaos does hit, it's like, that's okay. We've got this, right? Like, but for other people that stresses them out beyond belief. So it's interesting to see how that work plays out as well.
Yeah, and we were before we started recording, we were talking about the Enneagram, and I just want to touch on it because I'm a super fan of the Enneagram. So this is nine. There's nine types, and they're numbered 1 through 9, and it's neutral. One isn't better than nine. And they name different motivations. Like I would assert, human beings, we have 9 main motivations from this kind of, it's not a personality test, and I don't know what to call it, but I'm avid that it's not a personality test, but it just kind
No.
of helps you name what mainly motivates you.
Mhm. And
And
how you relate to others, right? So
yes.
as an individual, you might sort of lean in other directions or react to others' actions in a
Hmm.
different way, depending on what
Hmm.
your own personal enneagram is.
Exactly, right. Kind of how you view life, all of that. So we were talking about our own Enneagrams. Allie is a 3, which is nicknamed the Achiever. I don't know if you want to describe a 3 briefly.
Sure. So it's interesting when you think about the J parts of my Myers-Briggs type
Hmm.
indicator, right?
Hmm.
Combined with the 3 of the achiever. It's very much like you are motivated by goal setting and having those different benchmarks that you're looking to attain. You want to operate from a place of significance, which one of the other indicators is the Clifton Strengths Finder, and my
Hmm.
top sort of strength, if you will, is significance. So there's also some
Hmm.
alignment there as well. But in that achiever enneagram, it really is about self progress monitoring and having that sense of efficacy to
Hmm.
be able to say, yes, I did this, I got it. It's like the gold star
Hmm.
type of
Yeah.
approach,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and that the piece of efficacy too of believing you can do it. Like I love the 3s in my life because you guys are like, I'm not going to be stopped. I'm going to learn how to do this. I have a 3 friend. He was like doing this full time. He was like a full-time dad and full-time head of a something. He's a vice president of something. And then and then he like during the pandemic, he learned how to make kombucha. He like did this intense workout routine. Like his achieving exploded during the pandemic. It just like,
We like habit track everything, right? Like
mm-hmm,
if
mm-hmm.
you could put it in a planner or in an app, like we will find a way to habit track it.
Yes, I love it. I love you guys. And so my type, and just the type isn't boxing us in. It's just naming what mainly motivates us, right? So mine's the 7, the enthusiast. And so people listening to this podcast might see that I get excited about things. So like I get excited about things, and I want to read books on it, and I want to know about it. And sometimes I'll go real deep, and sometimes I go surface. I'm like, I want to read the first chapter of all these books. I have about like 10 to 15 books stacked next to my bed
Yeah.
because I read like a chapter from them once in a while in different ones. That's very like 7 to have that versus like person that has like one book and they finish it. Like I don't read like that. And so we're like my type is motivated by feeling fulfilled and satisfied. So we kind of go around life being excited about things, trying new things. We tend to bring like fun and joy into a room because we're just like excited for the adventure of life. And the thing that I really value about the Enneagram is when you learn your type, there's actually a continuum that you learn what's a healthy version of me and what's an unhealthy version of me. It's a continuum. So it's not like this or that. There's like, I don't know, I think 5 to 7 levels, seven, I think. That and on one, kind of resource that I use often, the Enneagram Institute. And we can see throughout when I bring clients through this, and you can see throughout your life kind of spanning the different levels of healthiness, right? So I know about like my three friends. You guys, like when you stress out, you work even harder, right?
Yes.
You like
It's
stress
it's that
into more,
it's
achieving
not
even more.
healthy. Yeah, there becomes like a new system and like you have to like tear apart the office and like organize everything. And yeah, there's I'm sure a fresh planner comes out from time to time, right? And then you're like, wait a second, like what okay, what's
What?
next?
Hold
How,
on.
yeah.
I love that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like my kind of stress behaviors are different. Like when I'm stressed, I don't work harder. As a matter of fact, like I want to go to something that feels good. So, whatever those things are for me, I'll go to do that. So I don't, so it's just it's great to be self-aware around that and to understand other because now I know the Enneagram really well because I'm enthusiastic about it. And I can see like people's types, and it's also not my job to type people, but I can see different motivations popping up in people and people's stress behaviors. So again, it's neutral for me. I can say, oh, that's a stress behavior, not they're so rude.
That's
Right.
ultimately, I mean, as we start moving from like the individual to the team space, that's where some of this becomes so important to have that awareness of your teammates or the individuals that you're coaching to be able to say, oh, like that's a stressor. That's not a pushback, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
or that's something that's motivating you and giving you energy. How do I frame some of our coaching actions together in a way that meets that particular type indicator? That that I guess awareness not only of self and what motivates you, but also an understanding of the perspectives of others can be such a powerful tool in helping increase the effectiveness of ourselves personally as well as professionally.
Yeah, exactly. So moving into alignment, I also really loved that chapter around like goal setting. And I think sometimes in my experience, sometimes people kind of feel like it's like fluffy, like "Oh, it's fine. Like we just need to do the work, right? And what in just kind of the work that I do around human-centered coaching, what I find, I'm very curious to hear kind of what that looks like on your end too. I find that, and you and I were talking about this before we started recording, people sometimes have subconscious goals they don't realize that are running the show, right? So I might say I have a stated commitment, I call it commitments. I have
Mhm.
a stated commitment and I say I'm committed to all of my teachers thriving, right? And then and then I have behaviors where I dismiss some teachers. Oh, they're resistant. She'll never change. She's just waiting for retirement. And there's a competing commitment there, right? Around like something else that is not. It's getting in the way of what I say I'm committed to. If I'm committed to all my teachers thriving, labeling and blaming some of my teachers is directly not in alignment with what I say I'm committed to, right? And that's where the real work is. And I love you said when you were kind of giving the overview of alignment, you said that's where burnout comes in. And that's so spot on. So I'd love to hear kind of more of your deeper thoughts around alignment and goal setting.
So in my work with teacher coaching, leadership coaching, design, there were a couple things that kept coming up more recently, I would say, in volume than they ever have before in my work as a teacher and as a leader and also as a consultant. And one was that concern of burnout, right? We're looking at real challenges around teacher retention as well as recruiting new teachers. And that's something for the sustainability of our field as a whole, we just can't continue to ignore. And along with that, as I was engaging in conversations with educators, I kept finding that the goals were pretty nebulous and fluffy. They didn't have a lot of clarity and commitment to
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
And what was happening is so often, regardless of position,
Mm-hmm.
folks were being guided day in and day out by their inbox
Mm-hmm.
rather than their goals. So
Mm-hmm.
it really took time with folks to kind of step back and say, okay, like, is that really your task list? Or is there a goal oriented task list that we should be crafting here and following? Because for so many educators, the list felt longer at the end of the day than it did at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
simply because they were being responsive to a lot of that incoming communication rather than guiding in a goal oriented way what their practices were day to day.
It makes me
So
think of, oh, sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
no, no, no. I was just going to say, so a lot of that work has honestly been working with educators to set really good personal and professional goals that
Mm-hmm.
have
Mm-hmm.
more clarity to them. And then also helping them with the systems, whether that's time blocking or disciplined action or accountability partners to make sure that those goals are happening and they're not just hitting inbox zero. Inbox zero might be one of your goals, but
Mm-hmm.
or there's something
But is
else that's
it?
there.
What? Why? See,
Right, right.
I would challenge someone if someone's like, one of my main goals is zero on my inbox. Why?
I I kid you not, Becca. There was one leader that I was coaching, and we had a question at one point, and she was like, "Well, what if I just like control alt deleted it? Like just like selected every email because she had like thousands of them, right, in her inbox, and like, what if I just did it?" And we had this very respectful dialogue about like what would happen. And we came to this place of like, well, the important ones are probably going to get back to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
so thinking through, like you said, like, is the goal really inbox zero? Probably not. It
Does that
shouldn't
help
be.
student
Yeah.
outcomes?
I- but unfortunately, that's what drives a lot of daily practice.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That is like such a poignant line. You said most of the times our inbox drives our day and not our goals. And it makes me think of like being proactive versus reactive, right? Are we saying, okay, I'm committed to this. This is my goal, and then showing up, like forgetting it, right? And then showing up and just putting out fires all day because that's not necessarily in alignment with your goal. Like, how do we become proactive to causing what we're actually committed to? And something that I loved you did, you took SMART goals and made them smarter. So your acronym is SMARTer goals. And the
Yep.
two,
So
can you, yeah, go ahead.
yes, so that actually comes from some of Michael Hyatt's work. So, his work was really helpful here, thinking about, how do we create goals that are exciting, but that are also a little risky. Like when
Mhm,
you look at some of the goal setting research, the folks who set riskier and, more difficult goals actually
mhm,
were more likely to achieve them than the ones
mhm,
that kind of set those safe goals. And
mhm,
that was important to me in this work as well, that we think about, what is a little bit of a push, or
mhm.
as Jennifer Abrams would say, like a stretch in our work that we can use to help ourselves to grow alongside our students.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you give really concrete, beautiful examples of like what not like what a non-example of a goal and a the nebulous goal and then an example right underneath. And I think you're really clear about like nebulous goals don't cause results.
They just don't. I mean, they're really pretty for a vision board, and
Mm-hmm.
visioning is actually a part of the goal setting process, and it's a very important part. But at a certain point, if that vision is going to become action, you've got to put more concrete structures and
Mm-hmm.
disciplines around it to be able to get there.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. It's just it's so and okay, I want to say more thing. I always wonder like sometimes because there's like really great ideas in education. There's like but somehow they get twisted. Like, how did goal setting go sideways? How did we like how did this happen that goal setting became not useful? I think there was, I my this is Becca's theory, not like the truth, but I think in compliance, like we had every year, someone had a good idea, I don't know, some point with the dinosaurs, and they're like, we are going to have teachers make goals, and it's like, yes, this is a great idea, and then it became this compliance thing, and kind of became watered down, if we're really going to be honest about it, to the point where it's like, I guess I have to set a goal. This is my nebulous goal of I'm having trouble thinking of one. Can you think of an example of like a non-example?
So like I want all of my students to love reading.
Yes, yes, good, good, good.
Right? Like very worthy goal, but like how are you actually going to know that you got
Track
there,
that.
right? Yeah.
Right, right. And so there's that. So then we're setting these goals that are ineffective over and over and over again, and then like going through the perfunctory motions of the teacher eval system. And I set a goal, did I achieve it? And then it's just become this, what it's become is not useful. But goal setting is useful. It's just become a thing that's ineffective the way we've been doing it. That's my point.
And it's the goal setting, but it's also the time allocation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I was really intentional about that word, that term, or that discipline of alignment
Mm-hmm.
for this chapter because it's making sure that your purpose, that goal
Mm-hmm.
aligns to the practice. And
Mm-hmm.
Lara Vanderkam has done some brilliant time log research across professions and a variety of income levels. And one of the things that comes out time and time again is we actually think we work more than what we do. And that's
Mm.
true for education as well as a lot of other fields. Part of the reason for that is we've gotten really committed to inefficient multitasking
Mm-hmm.
instead of recognizing the power in focused single tasking. And the
Mm-hmm.
goal setting process really helps with that because it gives you that pause to be able to say, am I doing these 7 things at once in a way that it's helpful? Or could I just do this one really well and actually get a lot further down the road?
And the way people do that is knowing what your goal is. You're not choosing anything out of thin air. You've sat down when things are calm and not stressful, and you've decided this is my focus, right? So that's amazing. I love that. And it does relate to burnout. It just, it
So
does.
the goals can't just be professional, right? I think we have a
Hmm.
responsibility as leaders and as coaches to be helping one another set personal goals as
Hmm.
well, right? To think
Hmm.
about that circle of doing in our professional space, but also our circle of relating to
Hmm.
other individuals and our circle of being that helps
Hmm.
to ground and give ourselves personally some focus. And unless we're tending to goals in each of those areas, I think that cycle of burnout is just going to continue. We're not going to get to this place of recovery and then hopefully sustainability that retains educators for the long game.
For sure, for sure. Um, that's exactly. I do want to share like a very brief story. I had a during the pandemic virtually coaching someone and a teacher, and she came and there's a lot of crying over Zoom. People just kind of releasing their emotions, and she came and she was crying and she was like questioning whether she should stay in the profession. And the thing she was upset about was she felt all this pressure from the parents and the admin and it was very upsetting to her. And I listened to her and all of that. And I said, once we kind of got calmed down, I said, what are you actually committed to? Like, why do you get up and teach? And then she kind of like thought and her face lit up. And I don't remember what she said now, it was years ago. It was something like, because I love to see the light bulbs go off in their head or something like that. I'm like, great, write that down. And I said, is any of these things you're worried about, are they related to that? And she's like, no. I'm like, okay. And she emailed me the next morning. She's like, Becca, I already feel better. Like it was just a shift in how we think. Everything else was the same. There's still the parents that expected this and the admin that expected this, but the way she felt was so much more energized. And we stopped an excellent teacher from quitting, which is, we love this.
Absolutely. And it's that focus and
Mm-hmm.
intentionality that
Mm-hmm.
is so important, not just in
Mm-hmm.
our work with students, but our work with ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
with our colleagues as well.
Yep. Yep, exactly. Oh my gosh, time is flying. I would love you to share what are some favorite tools that you have from the book that bring these five disciplines of capacity building alive? Like, do folks that read the book, do they have favorites? I'm just curious if you could highlight a few.
So this is actually one of my most exciting parts of this particular work, Becca, is that ASCD was fantastic about thinking outside the box with me and partnering in a way that enabled this to truly be a book about still learning in the sense of reflection and pause, but also still learning from a continuous and ongoing standpoint as well. So, embedded throughout the book, readers will find QR codes that lead to a wide variety of downloadable and editable tools that I've continued to add to as this work evolves with educators on the ground. So that's something that I'm really excited about, that yes, it's, a static text in the sense of the Kindle version or the print version that you might hold in your hand. But when it comes to applying those different concepts through a variety of reflection tools and team tools, that sort of resource library continues to grow. And that's been really exciting for me. When I think about the ones that folks have found perhaps the most helpful so far, a lot of them are in that alignment space or
Mm.
that discipline of
Hmm.
helping them to develop strong goals, but then
Hmm.
also start time blocking their calendar in a way that ensures that they aren't just wishes, but instead practices that can actually happen. I worked with a superintendent a few months ago, and he was at one of my conference sessions, and he grabbed me at lunch and he said, "Thank you so much. You are the first person in this field who has given me permission to actually schedule reflection on my calendar." And I think that's something that we miss at times, is that
Hmm.
value of stillness and pause and the ways that we can structure that for ourselves that feels sustainable and manageable, and in some ways, helps us thrive and continue to be committed to one another and to our students.
Reflection. It keeps coming back over and over again. I recorded a recent episode where my guest said, "We don't learn from our mistakes. We learn from reflecting on our mistakes." And it's like we we just we've got to stop doing this thing where we just go 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 all the time, because if we're not reflecting, we're not actively learning, revising, improving. We're just going, right? And adult learning theory, reflection, reflective practice, public reflective practice, that's awesome too. Right, like taking time to reflect on what we've learned, how our week went. That's like real authentic learning right there.
And it's okay to let go of practices too, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
constantly adding to sort of our bag of tricks, so to speak. And we forget sometimes that practices, approaches, strategies that may have served us really well 5 or 10 years ago, and were absolutely the most strategic, approach to learning for ourselves and learning for our students, might not be the best thing
Mm-hmm.
right now. And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. It's okay to say,
Mm-hmm.
you know what, that served me well in that time and space, but right now this is what's going to get us there. So I think, in that reflective space, it's as much about letting go as it
Mm-hmm.
is about adding to our practice as well.
For sure. Yeah, we don't have to keep everything.
No, we probably shouldn't.
We shouldn't. Exactly. Exactly. So, oh my gosh, it's time to wrap up. But I would love to ask you, is there anything else you'd love to leave the listeners with, knowing about, kind of the work from the book, walking away, with just, anything you want to leave them with?
I would simply say not to be afraid to step back from the busyness,
Mm-hmm.
to center yourself in the calm, and recognize that even in those quiet moments, there is forward progress that
Mm-hmm.
happens, and that we don't always grow in this constant state of forward momentum, but instead we sometimes find the best points of inspiration and inflection when we're able to engage in stillness and just pause. So for educators who might feel like they're in the constant rat race right now, in a place where they just can't stop, I definitely want to encourage you and let you know it's okay
Mhm.
to pause and to be in that place of still and quiet learning as much as you are in that place of busyness.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Like the neuroscience research shows we have to be still and actually bored to for our brain, for our little like neural pathways to solidify too. So thank you for sharing that. I love that as a takeaway message. So Allie Rodman, you have been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of your beautiful knowledge. Where can the listeners find you and your work if they want to get in touch with you or learn more about you?
You are welcome to check out my website, www.thelearningloop.com. I have tons of free resources there. I also host a free webinar every month, and I'm across social media channels at The Learning Loop. I would love to connect there as well.
Love that. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been great.